I'm going to be making a wooden Krenov-style shooting plane. I just finished a traditional wood plane with a 1 3/4 inch blade. This would be a smoothing plane. It's about 8-9 inches long. What I'm going to do this time is make a shooting plane. So this one I made a couple of years ago, and it's worked really well. I made some modifications, relative to a typical wood plane. So first of all, notice that it's much boxier. So it isn't cut down like a traditional plane. And on this plane I've got this sculpted to hold on to it a little better. Because a shooting plane is used on its side, I don't need to change the shape that much. So I've left it pretty boxy. I've also made the sidewalls relatively narrow because with a shooting plane, I want the blade fairly low to the side, and a thinner sidewall allows me to do that. So this one is just over 1/4 of an inch. I think it's about 9/32. I think I could probably go even smaller, but that's where it ended up. The blade is 1 3/4 wide, although on the next one I make, I'm going to use a 2-inch blade. Just gives a little bit more mass and gives me a little more flexibility in how it gets used. I did use a longer blade. So in this more traditional plane, this is the 3.5-inch Hawk blade. This is a 4.5-inch blade. And I did that for a couple reasons. One, I have a lower bed angle in this. This angle is 40 degrees. So because the blade's laying down further, it needs to be a little longer to reach it. The other reason is, typically on these planes, we cut some of the top off just to make it easier to, once again, to get to the blade and make it a little more comfortable to hold. Because I'm not doing that with this one, I need a longer blade so I can still reach it in order to tap it and change the side-to-side setting. The other thing that really makes this different is this is heavy. This plane weighs about 5 pounds. So most shooting planes that you purchase now are 5, 6, maybe up to 9 pounds. The Lee-Nielsen shooting planes are 9 pounds. So it's nice to have that extra weight to give you some momentum as you're cutting through end grain, typically what you're doing with a shooting plane. So what I did on this one is I drilled holes in these front and back pieces, and I filled them with lead shot, which was epoxied in place to keep it from moving around. So I'm going to do that also. Now, lead shot, it can be difficult to get. It might be kind of pricey. So another option is to use steel bar, just drill holes and put the steel bar in. Depending on your situation, that might be cheaper and easier. I think that covers all of the changes. So this is the blank that I'm using. So I've got maple in the center here, and I've got some Zero-Cote sidewalls. I just wanted something real hard out here, and this looks pretty cool. So I'll use those for the side pieces. I'm going to use some walnut I had kicking around for the wedge, and I'm not sure yet what I'm going to use for the crosspin. Doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the bed and the front angle. So like I said, this will be at 40 degrees, and I think I'm going to cut this at about 60 degrees, and that should work just fine. In order to make this 40-degree cut, I can't do that on my chop saw, right? My chop saw only goes to 45, and from 90, I actually need to go 50 degrees, which my chop saw doesn't do. So I'm going to lay this out. I'll cut it on my bandsaw, and then I'll use my disc sander to get that nice and flat. I've got my front and back angles cut. I've got the slot routed for the chip breaker screw. I've got my dowels in, all the holes drilled. So next I'm going to drill the hole for the cross pin. So it's still going to be in the same location as the typical plane. I'm going to come up 3/4 from the bed. perpendicular to the bed and 1 1/4 from the bottom. So I'll go ahead and drill in one side, put it back together, drill through and do the other side, and then I'll make the cross pin. I've got the cross pin set up now. That fits nicely. So the next thing I need to do, and this is where I'm doing something different than I would do with a typical plane, and that is I'm going to drill holes in the center parts to put the lead shot in. I'm also going to put in an insert for a knob so that I've got something to kind of push on when I'm using the plane. So I've got that all laid out in SketchUp. So I'll go ahead and lay it out on the blocks here, drill my holes, and then we'll go ahead and put the lead and the insert in. I've laid out the holes for where I'm going to put the weight in, and I've drilled the holes for the insert. So I'm going to use this style of insert. So I've drilled a 7/16 hole on both sides, and then I'm going to drill these holes for the weight just through this side. I'll go in to within about 1/4 inch of the far side. I've got a 1 1/2 inch Forstner bit in here, and I'm using my fence, so I'm always the same distance from the edge. I've lowered the RPM on the drill press, so it's about just under 900 RPM. So here we go. While I'm at the drill press, I'm going to install the inserts. I've got an installation tool here, and that goes on there, and I'll put this in the drill press, and that will help me keep things aligned when I put this in. Now I got a little out of sequence there. I should be fine though. I had intended to drill through both of these parts to locate the insert hole. So that way it would be easy to make sure they were aligned. Now I drilled this one first. I think I'm going to be okay though, because I did, I laid this out so I know exactly where my hole is. I know I'm up 1 1/4 inches. So I'm just going to transfer these marks out to here, come up 1 1/4 inches, and I should be okay. So this is a 1/4 20 insert, and I'm going to drill, maybe a 30-second bigger than that through this to give me a little wiggle room, and that should be okay. Okay, I drilled these holes here using my alignment marks, and that worked out just fine. So I think I'm good to go there. So next I will mix up some epoxy and put the lead in these holes. I've got some epoxy that somebody had given me a while ago. It's called Metal Set. It's by Smooth On. They make some nice stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. I just need something that's going to set up very slowly. So this takes a few hours to cure. I have some other stuff that's white, but this, I'm guessing this is gray. It's kind of like JB Weld, if you're familiar with that. So this should work just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and mix it up here. I'm going to, squirt out equal amounts of each. Well, I switched to the other epoxy. You can see this stuff it's still fairly thick, but it's definitely thinner. At least this stuff runs. that gray stuff was going to be really a pain to deal with. So I'm just going to see if we can get enough in here to keep the lead from moving around. So I'll just kind of dribble it in as I go, and worked fine last time. So here we go. I remembered as I was doing this the last time, I got the epoxy warm. So I'm using a heat gun here to heat it up, and it makes it much easier to deal with. So I'm just putting in a little bit of the lead shot at a time, and then kind of sprinkling, so to speak, some epoxy on here. Then I'll dump some more in. And I'll continue to do that until this is full. All right, I've got all of the lead in there. I might be able to fit a little bit more in, but I'm pretty happy with that. That was a little more challenging than I remember, but it's fine. And I checked here, if I run something across there, I'm not hitting anything, so everything's below this surface here. I did use the heat gun a little bit on the top there just to kind of melt everything in. Now you do have to remember, when you get epoxy hot, it tends to kick off a little more quickly as it cools back down again. So some of that had actually started to harden. But I think I'm going to be fine. I've actually warmed up the rest of the lead here now. So I've had the heat gun running on here for a little bit. And I think that's going to help. I'm not going to mix as much at a time this next time. That's going to help. So this next set should go a little bit easier than this one. So I'm putting some lead in and then kind of drizzling the epoxy on and putting a little more lead in. That seems to be working well. And it definitely helps to warm up the epoxy once in a while. So I'll kind of mix it up, see if I can get some of the epoxy on some of the lead, at least sporadically. That kind of helps solidify everything. So what I'm doing here is trying to make sure all of the lead shot at the top has some epoxy on it. That way, when I turn this sideways, some of the shot doesn't fall out. So I'm just making sure everything's at least a little bit wet and below the surface. Well, I finally got all of that in there and level, and I think it's all got epoxy on it. So I think I'm in good shape now. Because I was using the heat gun on there a little bit, I may have dried the material out a touch, so I've just got it sitting up on some stickers now, just so the air can get all to it and hopefully come back to equilibrium pretty quickly. So I think I'm set for now, and next up we'll glue the blank together.